Welcome to Red Ice Radio. My name is Henrik Palmgren. Our website is redicecreations.com. Thank you very much for tuning in. We have an important program ahead of us. We have Scott Tips with us on the line from the National Health Federation. And Scott has been specializing in food and drug law and also trademark law. And we have invited Scott today to talk about the very important Codex Alimentarius issue that Scott have been studying and in a way kind of spearheading, if I understand that correctly. We can ask more about Scott, ask Scott more about that later on in the program here. I also want to mention, of course, that Scott will be one of the speakers at the AV2 conference, the Alternative View Conference in London at the end of May. We've had Adrian Gilbert and Len Horowitz previously on the program, who also will be speaking at that event. You can, of course, read more about the conference at avii.co.uk or thealternativeview.co.uk for much more information about other guests, date, times, location, and much more. We from Red Ice will be there, and we of course hope to see you there as well. Also want to mention here before we bring Scott on that he will be launching soon here the UK and then later on the French branch of the National Health Federation. And this is also something that we definitely want to discuss. The website that you can take a look at for the National Health Federation is simply thenhf.com. That's thenhf.com. And we only have 1 hour ahead of us here today, so let's get this program rolling right away. Welcome to Red Ice Radio, Scott. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Henrik, for having me on. It's my honor to be on your program today.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time, Scott. So why don't we dive into it here straight away? Tell us a little bit about the National Health Federation, and I guess also why you decided to start this up, and in that maybe you can incorporate how you kind of got involved in this or got your eyes to this issue of codex and other health questions, so to speak.
Sure, I'd be happy to. The National Health Federation is based in the United States, but it's actually a bit of a misnomer. It should really be called the International Health Federation. The reason it's still called the National Health Federation is because it was started in the United States in 1955, making it the world's oldest health freedom organization for consumers. That is, not a trade organization, not for businesses, but for individuals. And we have members in 17 different countries and have had for decades. So we've been international for quite a while, but we've kept the old name and have just expanded using the old name. But I'm the president of the organization. I became the president in January 2007, so it's been about 2 years now. And before that, I was the secretary-treasurer of the organization as well as the general counsel, that is the in-house legal counsel for the organization since 1989. I first got involved because some friends knew of my interest in nutrition and health and my legal work defending doctors, and they got me interested in joining the organization back in 1986. Mm-hmm. And then in 1989, I actually became the legal counsel for the National Health Federation. We got involved in Codex actually about 12 years ago, maybe 13 years ago, and we were sending someone to monitor the meetings. They just took notes, and we paid their expenses and that sort of thing, and we reported on it a bit in our magazine, Health Freedom News. Mm-hmm. And but when I moved to Europe and was living here, I realized it was so easy for me to go to the Codex meetings, and I don't know if you want me to give an explanation about Codex at this point or a brief overview of it, but it was very easy for me to attend the German committee meetings of the Codex network, so to speak, and quite cheap, and I could stay with friends as well. So to fly from Nice Airport up to Berlin was nothing, and to go to the meetings. So I started attending the meetings in June 2000 as a member of the United States delegation. Well, when they got tired of having noisy old me on there, and kicked me off. Well, they didn't really kick me off. They just didn't let me on. The third year, I went to a lot of effort, and it was a lot of effort, to get the National Health Federation accredited, that is, to have official status with the Codex Alimentarius Commission, to allow us to be seated at the table, to speak out at the meetings, and to present papers and interact in real time with the other delegates at the meeting. We are unique in that respect in being the only health freedom organization that has the right to officially attend the meetings and speak out at these meetings. I think the Codex people realized later what a mistake they had made, and they haven't let any other organizations in since, and their requirements are quite strict. So they kind of pulled the ladder up after them after we got on board, and that was in, was that 2002, I think it was. So we've been officially accredited since 2002 and have held on to that status, and we go to probably 3 to 5 meetings a year throughout the world. The last one I went to was in South Africa for the Codex Committee on Nutrition and Foods for Special Dietary Uses. That's the committee that deals with dietary supplements, amongst other things, and one that we are quite keenly interested in.
Very good. And so you've been at this for about 7 years then. That's a long time. And you can define for us, for the listeners who yet at this point aren't aware of Codex Alimentarius. We've talked about it before on the show, but it might be good, again, to give a brief overview of what it actually is. And maybe you can also elaborate a little bit. I guess that you've been specializing then in the law side of the Codex Alimentarius issue. Is that correct?
Yes. The National Health Federation and I both, individually and as an organization, we deal with a whole range of other issues, though, from vaccinations and fluoridation and GM food crops and the like to Codex. Codex is just one part of it, but it's the one we're probably best known for internationally because we are the only voice at the Codex meetings we're the only ones that are able to speak out. And I personally have probably, of all the health freedom activists, gone to the most Codex meetings of all. So if I can be immodest and say that, but I have been going for this going on the 9th year now for me, and then the 7th year, as you said, for the NHF, having its own particular status there. But NHF did send me as a member of the American delegation those years that I did do that, and then NHF sent someone else prior to me, or at least paid that person's expenses. So we've been involved for quite a while now.
And
but you want me to explain about Codex structure a bit?
Absolutely. Please go ahead and tell us a little bit about that, and then I'd like just to ask you a little bit about actually what the meetings are like, just to get a little bit of an idea of what actually goes on there. But we can take that later on. Yeah.
Okay. Well, just real briefly, so I don't bore your listeners, but Codex Alimentarius is a commission, the CAC, so to speak, that was created in 1963 jointly by the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Health Organization, which in turn are under the auspices of the United Nations, to develop international food standards, guidelines, and recommendations for two purposes. These are their two purposes. One, to protect consumer health, and two, to ensure fair practices in food trade. And I'm perhaps going to surprise some of your listeners by saying I consider that actually a noble concept. The ideas that food should be safe and that barriers to trade should be eliminated are laudable ones. But where we as health freedom activists part company with Codex on many points is in the implementation of these ideas. So how are they implemented? You have this commission that was created in 1963, and because it was birthed by the FAO and the WHO, the FAO has its headquarters in Rome, the WHO has its headquarters in Geneva, then it meets in alternating years in both Geneva and Rome. That is, this year, for example, the Codex Alimentarius Commission will meet in Rome. In 2010, it'll meet in Geneva, and then it switches over to Rome again.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been going to these commission meetings just about every year. I think we've missed one year, but that was about it. And underneath the commission, they don't do all the work directly. They have in turn given birth to, at this stage, it's always varied, the number, but at this stage about 27 different committees that deal with different issues. There might be Farms and Fisheries Committee. There there is a committee on food labeling. There's a committee on food hygiene. There's a committee on general principles that establishes the rules and regulations by which the Codex committees and the Commission themselves are governed. There's a whole range of committees. The ones that we are most interested in as health freedom activists and fighters are the Codex Committee on Nutrition and Foods for Special Dietary Uses.
Mm-hmm.
And this is hosted by the country of Germany. So its meeting is typically held in Germany unless Germany says otherwise. Also, the Codex Committee on Food Labeling, which is hosted by Canada. They provide this meeting place, and they provide the chairman or chairwoman. And it's typically held in Ottawa, although this year, and that's the next Codex meeting I'll be going to, this year at the beginning of May, it will be held in Calgary in Alberta. And it's important because it says what you can say on these labels. Then there's a Codex Committee on Contaminants. There's the Codex Committee on Food Additives, which is hosted by China, and I went to that meeting last year. I did not go. I will not go to the meeting this year, but I did last year. Excuse me. There is France hosts the Codex Committee on General Principles that establishes the rules, and because it's so close, I'm talking to you from Paris right now. I could just hop on the metro and go to those meetings when they're held. Oftentimes we attend those as well. So you have a large number of committees that meet. Once they adopt rules, standards, and regulations that will affect everyone in all the Codex signatory countries, then those rules and regulations get passed up to the Codex Alimentarius Commission, which in turn votes on adopting them. But I'll tell you, it's pretty much a rubber stamp procedure.
It is.
Once it passes the committee, or the committees, the rules and the standards and guidelines are pretty much rubber stamped by the commission itself, and we've seen that happen, and it's really a kind of a disgusting thing to see because it's so automatic.
Yeah.
They don't even give it much thought.
Scott, does the Codex issue go under the guise of international law? Does this bypass individual nations' law, or how do you think that this will be implemented at the end? I mean, it's going into effect, as far as I know, at the end of 2009. Isn't that correct?
No, it's not going into effect at the end of 2009. That's a common mistake that people make that unfortunately was created by some health freedom organizations that don't know better and have confused the European Union's Food Supplements Directive implementation with that of Codex. It's a frequently made mistake, and when I hear that, I can tell you almost certainly where that mistake came from, even the names of the people who made the mistake. And it just shows the power of the dissemination of the Internet that this misinformation has gone out. No, the European Union's Food Supplements Authorities agency has put out its own Food Supplements Directive, and that, yes, will be implemented. It is being implemented, and it has been implemented, that will go into full and final effect at the end of this year. But that's something entirely different than the Codex process. We anticipated NHF that the Codex process, remember it, I even use the term process because that's what it is. It's an ongoing thing. There's not just one standard. There are many standards, some of which have already